starting a big cat rescue is a big thing that a lot of people just wouldn't think to even do. What was it that got you started with it?
Back when I was 8 years old, my grandmother made me take my cat and her 8 kittens to a shelter. And she assured me that that cat would be getting a fabulous new home and all the kittens would get new homes. And I found out not too long after that, that was a lie. And that most of the cats who enter our shelters are killed because there's just not enough people to adopt them. And so I vowed that that would be my life's calling. I would somehow rescue domestic cats and kittens from being killed in shelters due to overpopulation. So that was the path I was on. I was frequently at vets' offices. And when I was 17, I was at a vet's office and a bobcat had been hit by a car. And the vets can fix them up in 30 minutes or so, but then you're talking months of rehab for that cat's bones to heal and get ready to go back to the wild. And so they asked, they said, you've got cats, domestic cats. Would you take this cat home with you? And then when she's well enough, would you let her go? And I said, sure. And so it turned out that became a thing that I started doing from the time I was 17. It seemed like every time there was a bobcat that got shot by a hunter or poisoned or hit by a car, people knew that I would take them in because they are just vicious. Oh my gosh, there is nothing scarier than a bobcat. They are just wicked. But I love that about them. They're just so fierce. They're not afraid of anything. They're only like 25, 30 pounds. They're just this big, but they are like, I'd rather you throw me in a room with 10 tigers than with a bobcat because they're just so rough. But I love their resilience. And so I started doing that. And that's why when that bobcat was being sold in 1992 at an auction, the guy next to me who was bidding on her, I leaned over and I said, when that cat grows up, she is going to tear your face off. And he said, I'm a taxidermist. I'm just going to club her in the head in the parking lot and make a den decoration out of her. And so I started crying and Dawn started bidding. And of course, we came home with that bobcat and she had been declawed, so she couldn't be released. But she was the most god-awful pet you could possibly imagine. I mean, she'd lay on top of the refrigerator and wait for my husband to open the door. And then she'd leap down onto him and start ripping his hair out. She'd get in the bed between us and just, threaten him with all kinds of bodily harm if he dared get into the bed. She chased my daughter all over the house. We had a German Shepherd that was terrified of her. And so we started looking around for somebody that she could be with, that she wasn't going to bully. And this guy said he would sell Dawn a kitten, but we had to drive up there in person to get it. And so my daughter, Jamie, was 12 at the time. She brought one of her little friends from school. We drove a van up to Minnesota. And when we got there, it turned out to be a fur farm. And the guy had 56 bobcat and lynx kittens. And I asked him if there was this big of a market for these cats as pets. I couldn't imagine how anybody could make a pet out of a bobcat. I had seen bobcats for years. They do not make good pets. And he said, this is a fur farm and we just raise them up until they're a year old. And then the only part of fur they use is this little piece of white belly fur with the spots. And that's why it takes like 20 some odd cats to make just a short coat. And so I started crying again. And Dawn said, how much for every cat here? And that was how the sanctuary got started in such a huge way with 56 bobcats and lynx. But it wasn't something I ever set out to do. It was just something where I thought, this is a problem I can fix. And stupidly, I thought I could fix it fast. Turns out 28 years later, I still haven't got that problem quite fixed, but we're making progress. I mean, all of the designers now are giving up fur. The fur farms are closing left and right all over the place. There weren't any fur farms left by the time we got done that had cats. They still bred foxes and mink, but not cats. And we've seen the circuses gone bye-bye. Nobody wants to go to the circus anymore because they know that that's cruel. But the one thing that has been the holdout, I think, has been zoos. And people who I otherwise think are pretty intelligent people will tell me that the reason we have to have zoos is because that's how we teach our children to care about wildlife. And that just doesn't make sense. I mean, what we're teaching our children is it's okay to take away the freedom of these innocent animals because it amuses you. That is no message to teach anybody, especially not a child. And so I'm really excited about virtual reality. I spend a lot of time in virtual reality, and we have opened the world's first and second augmented reality zoos. We did that in mall spaces in Tampa and a place down in Plantation near Miami, where the whole thing are these big, beautiful posters of the cats, and you hold your phone up to the poster and it leaps to life on your phone. And that kind of an environment where you have this interactivity that's actually teaching you something, you're seeing the cats moving around on your phone. We thought that would be really engaging, but I also wanted something where you could be completely immersed in the cat's world. And so January of 2020, before we knew that COVID-19 was about to wipe us all out, I had hired a company called Xennial Digital, and we paid them $40,000. And I said, what I want is a game so that we are reaching all of these children that love gaming in virtual reality. And what they created for me was you put the headset on and now you are transported into the forest, Ranthambore Forest, which is known for its tigers in India. And the ranger comes up to you and says, we're missing this tiger and we need your help. And we'll teach you how to track a tiger. And so you go through all of this process of learning how to track tigers in the wild. And you're looking for all of these clues. And you actually find the tiger at the end of this. And she's been snared by poachers. And so you go through all of the stuff that our veterinarians would go through to make sure that she's healthy and she can be released back to the wild. And then you are the person who actually cuts the snare off of her and lets her go back into the wild, and she goes away chasing her prey. And I thought that's the way that you really get somebody's heart engaged in something. You made them the hero of this story. They start to care about, well, what is going on with tigers in the wild, or lions or cheetahs or Pallas cats or all of these different kinds of cats. And so at the end of that experience, the park ranger leads them back to the ranger station where they watch this cartoon that we created. And we had to make it into a cartoon because it was so difficult for people to wrap their head around. But the reason it's so important to stop the cub handling is because that creates a legal smokescreen for illegal activities like poaching. When you're petting a cub, it's not coming from the wild. They aren't taking cats from the wild and letting you do that. They're speed breeding them at places that you saw in Tiger King, where they're constantly just churning out cubs every 4 months or so. Whereas in the wild, a mother tiger would be 2 or 3 years raising her cubs. And so in what happens when you have all of these cubs entering the market, whether they're being given away to people as pets because they can't be used as photo props after they get to be about 16 weeks old, they end up in the black market for their teeth and their bones and their claws. If you get caught with a tiger skin rug in the United States, all you have to do is say it was your pet tiger, and nobody can do anything about that. If it were illegal to have a tiger and you get caught with a tiger skin rug, you're going to have to come to some accounting as to why you have that. And it means 5 years in jail and I think $20,000 fine. So just by virtue of the fact that we have all these people petting cubs and dumping cubs into the market and not regulating them, it's causing this market for their parts to expand. And when that market expands, the people who have a lot of money and really want the premium product, they want the wild tiger. In China and Thailand and Laos, it is one of the best bribes that you can give to government officials to give them a bottle of what's called tiger bone wine. And they make that wine by starving the tiger to death so that all they want is the bones. They take the bones and then they steep it in rice wine and create these bottles, these very beautiful gilded tiger-shaped bottles often, that are sold for huge amounts of money and used as these very impressive bribes for people in high power. And they want the wild tiger. They don't want some cage-raised, inbred tiger. They want the wild product. And so it's always going to be a lot cheaper to shoot a tiger in the wild than it is to raise a tiger, because that's $10,000 per year per cat just for their food and vet care, not any of the overhead of the sanctuary. So you're talking about $40,000 to get those bones, or $1 for a bullet. course people are going to go the easier route, and that's going to cause the extinction of the tiger within our lifetime. And so that's why it's so important, I think, for zoos to recreate themselves into these location-based entertainment centers, where when you go in there and you put on a headset, you are transported into that cat's world, or any animal, that elephant's world, that giraffe's world, that whale's world, and you see what it's really like to be them. That's educational, that's entertaining, and that doesn't require having animals languishing in cages.
What does it look like now at Big Cat Rescue?
On March the 15th of 2020, that was when here locally in Tampa, Florida, they started saying, you know what, people need to like start shutting down their businesses because we need to go into lockdown and stay away from each other. And so on March the 15th, we closed our gates. We said no more tours until COVID-19 passes. And then 5 days later, Tiger King came out, and there were people threatening to burn our place to the ground, people saying that these cats didn't belong in cages and they should be killed instead. I think our cats would disagree with that. They don't want to be in cages, but I can tell you that they have a very strong will to survive. So I don't think it's up to us to kill them just because they have to live in cages. And so we were doubly sure we weren't going to have anybody coming in at that point. And as you know, COVID has only gotten worse. It has not gotten better during all of these months that have passed since. So we have been closed to the public all of this time. It has cost us over $1 million of our annual budget, because that's how we raised money. We have to raise between $3.5 and $4 million every year to take care of the cats. And that was over $1 million of it right there, just in people visiting, that we don't have anymore. So that's why I've been doing things like Dancing with the Stars, and I've done over 2,900 cameos, and we have U2's dolls that from our wedding.
Oh, so